So I started recording. Welcome you guys to my next iteration, my next workshop in this series. Today is the first week that we're really diving into designs. Well, last week was kind of our intro week into talking about the actual design part of UX design and the UX design process. For the past 7 weeks or so before that, we talked a lot about UX research, and last week we had kind of an intro to the actual design part of UX. And so today is the first day we're actually talking about sketching and wireframes. So I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you about this. This is one of my favorite topics in UX design, and it's one of those topics that I don't think people that get exposed to enough. I think it's such an important part of the process, and I have some really strong feelings on why it's so important. So I'm excited to talk about this today and pick you guys' brains as well about design and all that sort of thing. So we're going to get started. If you would like to become a patron, becoming a patron of Fairbanks Studios LLC, which is my just personal LLC that I use, use for all of the kind of freelance work I do. If you become a patron of Fairbanks Studios LLC, you get unlimited access to all of these workshops. You will never ever have to worry about us running out of free tickets. And then also give you my give you my 10-page guide on how to become a UX designer included as part of being a patron. So if you've not gotten that yet, that is a way you can get that. So today, that was my little plug in the intro. Today's agenda, we have kind of two main topics we're going to cover. The main two things we're going to cover is, number one, we're going to talk about creative ideation, so the actual process of sketching and how you generate new ideas. What does it mean to sketch, and how do you innovate when you're sketching? How do you come up with ideas? And then the second part is we're going to talk about how sketching is more about conversation than it is about just making pretty pictures. We're going to talk a lot about what sketching is and is not, and how you can use it as a tool in your UX process to help create the best products and systems possible. So as always, I just always like to show you guys this life cycle at the beginning of every presentation. Like I said, the first section that we covered, kind of huge section of workshops that we covered, had to do with understanding user needs. And then now we're in the kind of design solutions phase where we're talking about creating design concepts. Once we get past the design phase, which will take us probably about another month to get through, I want to do about 4 or so more presentations covering the ins and outs of creating mockups and the software you should be using, and how to get from sketches to creating high fidelity, high quality mockups. Then we want to talk about prototyping candidates. How do we kind of test all of these candidates and pick the best ones? And then we'll talk about actually evaluating and verifying and refining our designs past that point. So that's the UX design lifecycle. If we focus just on the design solutions area, which is what we're covering today, there are 6 sections, and so this will likely be 6 webinars. So we've gotten through 2 already. So I was right when I said earlier that it is going to take us about a month more to get through this, because we have 4 more sections to cover. And so last week we talked a lot about design mindset and the how to get in the headspace when you start designing. Today we're going to talk a lot about generating designs or generative design. And generative design mostly involves sketching, and so that's the main thing we'll be talking about today. So I think that when you are going to prepare for design creation, it's so nice to have a beautiful office space. And I think that, a lot of us are working from home right now, and I think having a creative space has been really important for my own creative journey, for my own ability to generate new ideas and new and fresh ideas. I think it's easy when I'm at my office because I can, my first job, I had a cubicle so I could hang things on the wall and kind of make my own beautiful space. And at home, I have a lot more control over my space. So obviously I can create some beautiful home setups like I've shown here. But I also struggle with kind of keeping them separate, right? Like sometimes I'm working in my bedroom, I'm like right next to my bed. So I think preparing for design creation in this season of life with coronavirus, with quarantine, with much of us working from home, I think it's about having that designated space in your home where you can feel free and feel good about creating, and you feel inspired by the objects around you. Nothing is too cluttered, nothing is too neat. Everything just feels right, and that's really individual on like what kind of space works best for you. But yeah, there's a lot of beautiful examples of office setups on like Pinterest and stuff, and I have some beautiful ones on here. YouTube has some great videos on how to set up a beautiful office space. I know you guys know all that, but yeah, I just think that I wanted to stress that as being important. Some things to think about including in your office space for design creation. You know, you might want to look at filling your walls, shelves, and tables with things that are artifacts, representations of ideas, images, props, toys, notes, posters, sketches, diagrams, mood boards, and images of other good designs. So those are just some ideas on how you can fill up your space to get your creative juices flowing. And that goes for pretty much any creative field, but yeah. Susan says, I missed your first webinar. Will you have another webinar about developing a design mindset? I do have it available on YouTube to watch, so I can, I will link the recording for this webinar on YouTube, and if you click that webinar, you'll be able to access all of my past webinars on YouTube, so you'll be able to find them once I send that out. So here I wanted to show this kind of flow chart, and basically the flow chart shows generative design activities. So how you're going to actually explore your design ideas. So ideation, that ideation section is often also called brainstorming. And brainstorming or ideation usually spawns ideas, and ideas are articulated in sketching. Sketching, you know, triggers more ideation and sketching. When you look at one sketch, you might be inspired to create another. Then you might want to do different variations and have alternative ideas. And then you'll go into actual critiquing, where you're going to bring your sketches to others and have them evaluate them. And then you're going to want to refine those ideas. Get rid of pieces that, you know, based on the critique you received, the feedback you received, you'll be able to kind of refine the ideas that you came up with to create even more ideas. So it's this cycle, and I think every time you take a trip around this circle, you're going to come up with better and better ideas. So that's really cool. And even one sketch, even if your first sketch is really, really bad, really, really ugly, doesn't really bring a lot to the table, it might help. I think it's good to not just show everyone all the time or think about all the time your best ideas. I think even sometimes when you draw out your worst ideas, you can see elements in those ideas that can turn into something great. So I think that's something I really believe really strongly in, is when you're sketching, I think that it's so important to just get your ideas out. Even if they're bad, it's okay. If you have a bunch of sketches that look bad, that might inspire some really good ideas down the line. So I think that, you know, rather than like freezing and having this like mental block of not knowing, you know, because sometimes you can get kind of the UX designer's version of writer's block, where you don't know what to sketch next. And I think sketching anything is better than sketching nothing. So that's kind of how I feel about that. But ideation, I want to talk about the definition of ideation or brainstorming. And ideation is the process of creating various and innovative proposals for ecological interaction and emotional designs. This is a highly creative and fun phase. I really love sketching. I love brainstorming. This is a time where you can get clients and users to participate, as well as other team members, as well as other designers, developers. Doesn't matter. Everyone's got different ideas. when you have a highly diverse group of people working on with you in a brainstorming session, it helps you create ideas that you otherwise would not have come up with just on your own. And because it brings a lot of varied perspectives. If only people with very similar backgrounds were participating in ideation, they would only bring ideas, concepts, and constructs from that background and experience. So that's why it's so great to have a lot of different people participate. So an idea is a visualized design proposal in this context. I know you guys all know what an idea is, but in this specific context, under the guise of UX design, it's a visualized design proposal that can include visions of new ecologies, interactions, and emotional responses, and capabilities in a system or product. Without an environment or culture of openness, ideas can be cut down by premature judgment. So kind of going back to what I was saying about no ideas are bad ideas. At first, you really want to sketch, get all of your horrible ideas out there, get your okay ideas out there, and get your great ideas out there, because you never know like what might come out of each sketch that you create. So I wanted to briefly cover a couple of different ways you can think about sketches. One thing that I hear from people is they don't know how to frame their sketches. How do they come up with different types of different ideas, different solutions to a UX problem? And one great way to do that is by using your personas. So personas are, if you are unaware, personas are basically it's a profile for the most common denominator user. You might have a lot of different personas for a product or system, and this is a great example from the Nielsen Norman group on personas. It might have, you know, someone's picture. It might it's a fictional story of this person that is this company investigator, but it helps because it's kind of this compilation of the real stories that you've heard from the people that are going to be using your product or system. So personas work best in design situations where the work domain is broad and unconstrained, where personas are used in designing commercials, products, or systems. In such situations, they help account for the nuances and activities in the personal lives of various work roles. So by designing for multiple personas, you want the design to make the primary persona very happy while not making any of the other personas unhappy. So that's a great way to start generating some ideas, is by thinking about what the user that you're designing for wants. Personas can also help us critique sketches because they provide a way to evaluate whether or not a design matches a target audience. So it really is more of a mindset, a mind framing exercise than anything else. But I think it's a really helpful place to start when starting to sketch. So here's just a little quick flow chart that kind of illustrates how sketches might be generated from different personas. So you have your entire user class up top. You might pull out the 4 individual personas you want to focus your sketches on, and then you're going to have 4 different options for designs already. And you might end up combining different elements of all 4 of those sketches to create a final design that works for the entire user class. So yeah, that's just a way to think about sketching to kind of start. So what is sketching? Sketching is an indispensable part of design, and if you're not sketching, you're not doing design. Sketching is it's so important. I mean, that sentence I got from like straight out of this book. Like, this is not opinion. It's straight out of the UX design book, or the UX book 2, which is by Rex Hartson and Parda Pila. It's a great textbook on user experience. It's the first place I go to when designing these workshops, because it's got some really great information, and it is based on the agile design process. And that is a verbatim quote from that book. If you're not doing sketching, you're not doing design. And it's not meant to be mean. It's just meant to be it's just meant to say, you know, sketching is, if you're not sketching already in your UX process, it is going to transform the way that you do designs. It is going to take your designs to a much higher level than you would have be able to previously. So sketching is a visual medium for exploration. So what kind of tools do we use when we're sketching? So sketching is always, in my opinion, best done first on paper. I've also seen designers use something like a Surface Pro and like a stylus to do sketches. But for me, I just like pen and paper. I like using a sketchbook that has this kind of dot grid. People use different things. I'm just kind of throwing some ideas around with you about different things that you can use that are great to use, that a lot of designers use. So for me, that's definitely using sketchbooks with a dot grid. I find that the grid helps me to create designs that are balanced, you know, without having to pull out the ruler all the time. I can draw my screens in the width and height that I want consistently across the page. So that's why I like using that style of sketchbook, but anything you're comfortable with works. I also like using sketching pencils, and you can get any of these supplies at any kind of arts and crafts store, on Amazon, anything like that. Sketching pencils, you'll notice that they are different from the average pencil you might use for schoolwork, the yellow pencils, because they have varying hardnesses. So you'll see in this image, a 10B is much, much darker than 8H, because H stands for hard. I don't remember what B stands for, to be honest, but B pencils are typically much darker. H pencils are typically much harder graphite, so they have a much lighter color when you draw with them. And that helps with sketching just because, you know, sometimes I'll take like a really hard pencil and draw really lightly and then go back over it with a really dark pencil. Sometimes I will want to emphasize things on my page, so I'll use a dark pencil to kind of emphasize a piece of the sketch that I really like or want to draw attention to, that sort of thing. So that's why I like sketching pencils, for those reasons. I also love micron pens. Something I do a lot of is I will sketch with a pencil first and then draw back over it with a micron pen. And that just helps me to clean up my sketch by drawing the sketch twice on the same page, just going over it again with pen and then maybe erasing some pencil marks. I'm able to go over the sketch again and clean up any areas that maybe look unclear, so that I have a cleaner, nicer looking sketch, and it is easier to use as a communication tool with my teammates, with my users, that sort of thing. I've seen UI stencils a lot. I don't use those. I always get recommended UI stencils like on my Facebook ads and stuff. I've never used one. So you guys will have to tell me if you like those or not, if you've ever used one. Personally, I just use like, I have a little mini ruler. I have like shape stencils that have like a bunch of circles. I don't have them here with me, but I can go get them later if you want. But they just have like a bunch of circles, a bunch of stars, a bunch of squares in them, and so it just makes tracing really easy, and I can get like straight lines really quickly. I do like the idea of UI stencils because you can have some of those really common icons that you can just trace all the time, but yeah, again, I haven't used those yet, but they look like fun. I don't know. And then again, just wanted to touch on the whole inspiration piece. I think books are one of the best things you can get just to have around your workspace for inspiration to do some really cool designs. So let me check on the group chat. You have one, it's really useful, Gary says. That's really awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Maybe I gotta buy one. I'm sure they're not expensive because it's just like a piece of metal, right? So I wanted to talk about the purpose of sketching. And this is why sketching is so important for UX designers. Sketching, first and foremost, is not art. I do have a lot of examples that I want to show you guys of really beautiful sketches, but I also want to emphasize that sketching doesn't have to be a perfect piece of art 24/7. Not every UX designer is an artist, and you don't have to be a beautiful fine artist to be a great UX designer. Anyone can sketch. It's more about getting your actual thoughts on paper in a way that's clear to an audience. But I think over time, it is helpful to develop the skill of sketching and produce, high quality, good looking sketches, just because, it's easier to communicate. And there is something to be said about showing off something like that to a client that makes them feel like you're an expert in the field. People are so easily swayed by things that look pretty. So it does definitely help to like develop that skill. That's something I'm definitely working on personally, is just trying to spend a lot of time sketching for fun and developing that skill on my own. A sketch is also meant to be a conversation. It's meant to be something that you can show to others to get feedback and talk about the ideas that you have, so that you can get and you want to like make sure that, or you might use it to like draw out the idea that someone else had that they articulated to you, that sort of thing. So it's a great way to have a conversation about a product or system and develop those ideas. A sketch should be about the user experience and not about the product. So this kind of ties into the whole sketching is not art thing. The most important thing when it comes to sketching is that you are designing, you are drawing for the user, and you're not drawing to make a beautiful product. So your main focus should be on the user and their needs when you're sketching. And that's, again, why I suggest kind of looking at your personas and using those as frameworks, because I think it's super, super helpful to look at a persona and say, this is who I'm designing for, and go for it, because that's really going to help you focus on the user rather than creating a beautiful product. Sketching, it takes time. So I think that it's important to know that you might spend a lot of time sketching. If you have a really complex product or system, it might take a long time, and that's okay. Sketching also leads to innovation. There's something about generating lots and lots of sketches that gets your creative brain working, kind of also tying into the next point, which is sketching that is done with your hands. The kind of, head, mind, hand connection. I'm getting a little too like artsy fartsy, but it's such a great, like that's creativity. Like that's just the most basic form of innovation, is actually just taking pencil to paper and drawing stuff out. So yeah, sketching is really cool for these reasons. Anyway, I wanted to show you guys, we're getting towards the end here, but I did want to show you a bunch of beautiful sketches just for inspiration. I think that personally, I like having my own developed style for sketches that I can fall back on. Thinking about the different elements you might use in sketches. For example, you might create form fields and just draw a box as your form field. You see that here. You might do pictures as a box with an X through it. That's a really common way that people will draw like image placeholders. Oftentimes icons can be a little circle. So these are just like different methods people use to create sketches that are readable, and you can kind of see, you can kind of decode the sketch, with things like, instead of just drawing out the stock image picture, you can just like do a box with an X and you know what it is, you know why it's there. You can do things like draw an actual outline of an iPhone, or you can just draw a box, whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever makes the most sense for you and your needs. So yeah, I don't know. And you can see like people have varying details in their sketches. This is someone that has used the dot paper. I think another really important thing with sketches is annotating like this, annotating with words. That way you are helping the viewer along with what you meant by the sketches, and also helping your own memory when you're talking through a sketch. Having those notes to yourself is really, really helpful, so that you can share what's going on and share your idea. Here's a really beautiful sketch that I found. I just found these on like Google Images or whatever, but this is for like, they have like an earpiece element to this, I guess. So I thought this was really pretty. And I know that like, I know in our Facebook group in particular, if you guys don't know, I run a Facebook group for UX designers. I think that there is some debate on like, do sketches need to be beautiful? And I don't think they do. They don't necessarily need to be this beautiful to convey the message you're trying to convey. But at the same time, I think having something like this in your portfolio really impresses people, just from my personal experience. But yeah, I don't know. There's pros and cons to both. But I think that if you're just sketching to get shit down on paper, excuse my language, you don't have to like make it look this nice. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about. But there's just another example of someone that used annotations, I thought, really well, with little arrows just pointing to different parts of their web page. And they did spend some time and actually draw out like outlines of the images they would be using in their image or in their design. So I guess it really just depends on like how detailed you want to get. They just use little squigglies or lines to indicate subheaders and body text, which is pretty common. You'll often see like squiggly lines used for subheaders and like straight lines for body copy. They also used a grid paper, which I've never used before, but similar concept to the dots. It probably helps to have that, you know, to scale things properly. I love this sketch. I want to learn how to sketch this nicely. I think it does a really great job of leading the eye. They also use numbers to guide the reader through each sketch. And I love that they do this. I love that the arrows are used to annotate as well as bring the reader from screen to screen. I love the use of hand sketches to show how the user is actually going to be interacting with the product. So yeah, I mean, I wish that the words were in English so I could read them, but I absolutely love this. I think this is such a cool way to do sketches that's really, really useful. So the last thing I just wanted to cover briefly is critiquing. When you critiquing is an activity where design ideas are assessed to identify advantages, disadvantages, and constraints and trade-offs are each evaluated for each idea. There's not a, like, this is supposed to be not super formal, not super structured. You might do something like present your idea to a group and then have them discuss it. And the main things you want to get away from a critique are, you know, does the design meet design goals? Does it fit well within the ecology? Does it support the interaction needed with other devices? Does it provide good usability? Does it evoke positive emotions? Does it mean something positive for the users? And you want to include team members, clients, users, and outside perspectives if possible as well. The stage after sketching and before going into the computer with your designs is a great time to get feedback, because you're not, something about computer generated designs does sometimes feel a little more complete, like this idea that we've gone so far down the road of creating that we can't back up yet. Whereas something like a pencil sketch, this is a bad example because this does look like it took a long time, but something like this that looks like it didn't take very much time can easily be thrown away and you can start over again. And it's not a huge burden on your time to create something like this. And so it feels a little bit more like, okay, I want to get this criticism, and if it's all horrible, that's fine. I want you to be honest with me. I want you to tell me what's good and what's bad so that I can make the next sketch even better, or know what to do when I get to the computer stage, or whatever that may be. So anyway, that is the end of my presentation today. This was so much fun to do research for. Thank you guys for listening. And if you have any questions, I will take them now. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.